I am Klubertanz, score composer for the film NINER. I was first approached because Grant had seen my name pop up in some forum on Vimeo. He mailed me and asked me right away if I would like to score the picture. So that was showing a lot of trust in advance from his side. Further contact was exclusively via email. Now, you can write a lot and say a lot and still things don't get done in the end. I've had that more than enough. The internet makes it easy to step out of obligations. As I had the impression that Grant wanted me for good, I felt no risk at all. We exchanged a written agreement too. Actually, there had been already one track by another composer who was pitching for NINER. Grant even turned down that artist for me, so there was no room for skepticism on my side at all. We ended up caring for all the musical needs of the production. The trailers, the Kickstarter campaign, the making of episodes, and of course the film itself. Developing a theme for a character is closely connected to the process of determining the general score parameters. When trying to find the right color for characters, I'll often ask myself, what music would they listen to or have been brought up with? Sometimes it's clear that there is to be a purely orchestral score, so I'm looking for instruments in the orchestra that might represent a person best. For me, it's easier to find the details for a theme or motive when this instrumental or color question is decided beforehand. Choosing an instrument means also choosing a certain range of possible frequencies, so you will shape a theme very differently when it's conceived for a high-sounding instrument opposed to one for a bass instrument. A very non-melodical exception to this is Bobby's music in NINER. I had started sketching possible themes for him, but they all sounded too heroic and out of place for a bad guy. In the end, only urban drum loops and some dirty synthesizer sounds remained, but they are absolutely sufficient to identify Bobby's involvement into the respective scenes.
Farron, man, is this his house or yours? Who is this queerbait? Yeah, you.
Piano for the female lead, crime victim Abby.
You're gonna need stitches. We need to get her to the ER. I thought we weren't touching anything.
And guitar for the title role, police officer NINER.
What do we have here? He's screaming, please don't hurt me, I give up. Why don't you go untie Abby? That way, she could see the man who murdered her family face to face. Then she can decide what happens to you. Go on. What are you waiting for?
The biggest challenge in making a score come together and feel consistent may be that you are not necessarily working in chronological order. Maybe some parts of the film are locked earlier than others, or you are not able to start at the very beginning because sometimes You need to find a good starting point, some places to initialize the scoring process, and this can be the first cue, but it doesn't need to. Also, you have to resist the temptation of adding new colors all the time. There are so many sounds on the market that it's hard to realize the merits of limitation, but working with a fixed palette and only going astray if it's unavoidable or if it really signifies something helps a lot in getting a consistent sonic style. Deciding instrumentation is touching on the basic decisions about style, size, scope, context, setting and all. It's a matter of taste too. You wouldn't score a Baroque period drama with synthesizer pop, except if this were a very special out-of-the-way gimmick that fits the film's style. Once you have a feeling for the characters and setting, most instruments suggest themselves. My personal background is orchestral composition. That's what I do most. So in the case of NINER, the classical string orchestra with added brass and percussion is enlarged by piano, guitars, drum set, folk fiddle and a handful of urban and synthesized sounds. This is what it was coming up after a lot of remote brainstorming and exchanging inspirational tracks with our director Grant, and it turned out to be the very combination I needed to tell the story musically. My favorite pieces of hardware are still old-fashioned pen and paper, which can go a long way. All my sketching is done handwritten on paper. Of course, the days when you could be a film composer with only these tools are long gone. You have to have very good computer knowledge. Nevertheless, I find the process of entering music into a notation software and then playing it back results in too much order. The human element is missing, there's not enough dirt. And even with a good sample pool to play back your electronically written scores, you will never get the feel that you have when you are working inside a sequencer DAW, playing every note yourself, as imperfect as that is. I am relying on a powerful, fast laptop with a lot of RAM, a stage piano for MIDI input, an external MIDI sound card, some dedicated monitoring speakers, a bit of outboard gear like microphones and all that, and a pair of headphones. That's all. No big studio setup, but you can do quite efficient work with this. I don't expect to get the perfect idea of how to do a score by just reading the script. You can't be inside another person's mind, so the only one with the overall vision is usually the director. He's keeping all the creative input consistent and you have to rely on his judgment. You yourself know only a part of the big picture. Even when working remotely, as we did with me sitting in Germany and the rest of the team in the US, a spotting process is very useful in order to make a plan. Normally you would meet and watch the raw edit together. We did all the spotting by mail, agreeing on all the music starts and stops before even the first note was written. This way I could carefully plan and prepare all cues, ticking them off one by one. Integrating a theme into the film's flow is an issue that is inseparable with the conceiving of the whole music concept. NINER's theme, for example, was first only an intellectual fancy, playing with his numerical name NINER, trying out a 9/8 meter, grouping 9 notes in a row, constructing rhythms out of multiples or fractions of the number 9, etc. Then I added some harmony, a 4-chord progression that you will hear used throughout the film, even when there is no real theme going on. And last was the choice of instruments. It was clear early on that I wanted to use electric guitars and drums. NINER certainly isn't a classical string quartet guy. When basic parameters like these are fixed, the music easily adapts to the situation. You can play with every element, use only the notes of the bass line or the melody, Use the chords, chop up the tunes, invert them, mirror them, augment or diminish them rhythmically or in tempo, transpose everything or parts of it. There's no end of possible variation. Having the script and the notes from the director in advance, long before shooting, was a great advantage, though it is perfectly normal to get in after the production wraps. I prefer it this way much more. I'm an early bird by nature, meaning that I like to be thinking about a film at script level, reading and analyzing carefully, forming a music concept for evaluation and discussion, and maybe even doing some rough character or mood sketches in order to decide on style and instrumentation. I think every artistic decision that is out of the way before post-production will reduce the stress and increase the level of creativity and quality a lot. It gives you far more time to think and develop, to experiment. So for me, it's the earlier the better. Grant has a very nice way of giving constructive feedback. He addresses issues very precisely. Our reference to rely on is the timecode buried into the picture. We were able to change things on a frame level. Even when speaking of music, in non-musical terms, it was always clear what Grant wanted. He even made musically accurate suggestions that I could translate into notes right away. I hit the right feel at first pass in about 50% of the cues, which is not such a bad ratio. The only one odd sound that survived from this list was the prepared piano piece from Shutter Island that was composed by John Cage. A solo folk violin is giving air to the melancholy of the small town setting. The scenes exploring the traumatic events of the crime exploit contemporary classical techniques like string clusters, aleatoric playing, and prepared piano.
Don't touch anything.
For a composer, the most important is that the big one has a music budget and the composer can pay his rent. Also, the possibility to do live recordings is connected to budget too. In a big production, there usually is a whole music department. Here, I have to wear all the different hats myself. Composer, arranger, performer of every note, programmer and recording, mixing and mastering engineer, you name it. It's astonishing what the crew of NINER achieved, with very little money and only a few people. Of course, everybody contributes in a way that exceeds by far what you could expect from a regular production. For myself, I make no difference if I get paid or not. If the project is interesting, I devote the best I can offer. There was never a doubt concerning completion of the project. After all, it's a university thing, so the team has to deliver in order to get their grades. But apart from that pragmatic reason, there was so much creative urge and passion behind it that for me there was never any question at all that NINER wouldn't be finished and finished well. I can only encourage every fellow composer out there to take the opportunity of working on such projects. Take it when you can get it. There's more artistic freedom, time for experimentation when you do independent film. Although you have to be careful to choose only quality projects. Often there may be more inspiration than a micro or low budget production, but also it is often an excuse for inferior execution. Over time you develop a sense of how things may turn out, and I am very happy to say that my instinct was more than right with NINER. Despite its budget, NINER is a full-scale feature film production in everything but money, with about 75 minutes of music to cover. As a rule of thumb, you're able to create and produce about 2 to 5 minutes of music per day, counting normal working days. So I have a day job to attend to, teaching at university, so during term my students demand, rightfully, my full attention and time. Also, I'm leading a project chamber orchestra that has to be organized and scheduled properly so that performances are a success. So basically, I'm reduced to recording and composing on weekends or when I'm off term. I've been juggling with as many as 7 or 8 movies in parallel, but this is only possible with very short formats or when the production stretches over a long time. So I've had a very hard time getting it all done on the spot and still maintaining the creative energy. In order to achieve this, you need a lot of discipline, a good plan, and you have to know your speed and your powers. You should never lie to yourself about this aspect. I definitely feel I've made the right choice by agreeing to work with Grant and the crew, as I found myself to be on a very professionally minded and dedicated team. Everything was meticulously planned, and I always felt duly appreciated. Summing it up, it was hard, but it was worth every moment of it.